Hello everyone and welcome to the lesson on solving linear equations in standard form. We'll just begin with our objective, and what we are trying to accomplish today is um, we want to be able to solve linear equations in standard form. So let's just start today with a few notes. We'll go through some examples and then you all will be ready to practice these concepts on your own. So we'll start with a few key vocabulary terms. And our first term is an equation is a statement of equality. And let's look at a few examples of equations. So 3 equals 3 is our first example of an equation. Okay, 2x plus 4 equals 8. There's another example of an equation. 3y equals 6 is a third example of an equation. Now, one thing that makes these equations different from just an expression is this equal sign. Okay, whenever we have an equal sign, we have ourselves a statement of equality. This means that 3 is equal to 3. If we look at this next one, we have this expression on the left, 2x plus 4 is equal to the number 8 on the right. And in our third example, the expression 3y is equal to 6. So this equal sign is what is telling us that we have ourselves an equation. Okay, so it's important to note that when we have an equation, we have the equal signs that allow us to solve for our variable when we're dealing with one variable. So our next important term is what we're focusing on for this unit, and these are linear equations. So a linear equation with a variable x is an equation that can be written in standard form. And what that form looks like is a, and then here in red is our variable x plus b is equal to 0. Where we have a and b are going to be real numbers. X is going to be our variable. So whenever we have an equation that can be written in the form ax plus b equals 0, we say that that equation is written in standard form. And here we have a linear equation with a variable x. For our last key term or key vocabulary word, what we're focusing on today when we solve these equations is what we call the solution set. And the solution set is the set of all values for which the equation is true. Now for these first few equations, we'll see that we will get one unique solution. Okay, in future videos we'll see that that's not always the case. Sometimes when we're dealing with linear equations we can actually have no solution, or the third case is that we can have infinitely many solutions. Now in these examples that we're about to do, we will get one unique solution. So let's look at these examples. So we're trying to solve linear equations written in standard form. And each of these three equations are written in standard form. We have this equation on the, or this expression on the left is equal to 0. Okay, this expression here is equal to 0. This expression here is equal to 0. And that all three of these are of this form here. We have a variable x, or in this case our variable is z. In this case our variable is v. In this case our variable is x. And here we have ax plus b equals 0. Here we have a 1v minus x equals 0. And this is of the same form as well. They're all written in standard form, and they are all linear equations with a variable x. So how do we go about solving these? Before I try to do that, I want to make sure that I have read my directions and I know exactly what I need to do to answer this question. And you can see that we're asked to do two things. We're asked to find and verify the solutions. Now let's look at number one. If I'm looking at this first one, and we'll just call this number one, I can ask myself, what minus 10 will give me 0? And if z equals 10, that should give me 0. Now this is what I think should be the solution, but I need to verify that according to this second part of the directions. So how I verify that is I plug in 10 for z, and what I get is 10 minus 10, and that is equal to 0. So my solution, z equals 10, checks. Now if I go to my second example here, we have an equation v minus 4 equals 0. So I'm going to ask myself the same question. What minus 4 will give me 0? Well, and I think if v equals 4, then I should get 0. And I need to check that by just calculating 4 minus 4. And that is in fact equal to 0. So again, I see that this is the correct solution, and that checks. Now my last example, I'm going to do this one step at a time. Here's example 2, here's example 3. So in example 3, I want to know what value of x will give me 0 make this left side 0, because it is equal to 0. So how I will go about solving this is one step at a time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get x by itself by subtracting 6 from both sides. Okay. Now an equation is like a scale. It's balanced on both sides. Now if I were to take 6 off of one side of the scale, this side would be heavier. So I have to actually do the same thing on the right side in order for the scale to be balanced, so this equation remains equal. So if I subtract 6 from both sides, I still have two equal quantities, and I'm left with 2x on this side, and I'm left with negative 6 on the right side. Okay, now I have x is being multiplied by 2, and I want to get x by itself, so I can undo multiplication by 2 by dividing by 2. If I do that on the left side, I have to do the same thing on the left side, on the right side, in order to keep these equations balanced. So 2 divided by 2, these cancel because those are 1. 1 times x just leaves me with x on the left. And when I look at the right side, I have a negative 6 divided by 2. Okay, and a negative divided by a positive is a negative, and then negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. So based on how I solve this using valid steps, I got x equals negative 3. Now I just need to verify that this is actually a solution. And the way I verify that is by calculating. So if I go back to my original equation and I let x be negative 3, I get 2 times negative 3 plus 6 equals 0. Okay, now if I continue to simplify this, 2 times negative 3 gives me negative 6, and then plus 6, and that is equal to 0. So that means negative 3 is in fact the correct solution. So I go back and put a box around this, and that one works. So I'm all done. So that is how we would go about solving solution or linear equations written in standard form. Now in future videos, we're going to have linear equations written in non-standard form, and we're going to apply the steps of combining like terms to simplify one side of an equation, and then solving for a particular variable by undoing certain operations in future videos. But for now, that's all for today, and now we're ready to practice on our own and master the concept of solving linear equations written in standard form.